Hey there, Abdel Misa here. First thing first, I'm doing a YouTube live on Friday, June 26th at noon Eastern Time. You can ask me anything about the topics that I have covered, including the stock market, housing and oil, or maybe even my favorite color. The link for the YouTube live is on my channel. It's called Ask Me Anything. So make sure you add it to your calendar again, June 26th at noon Eastern Time. So this is the third video of the housing series. Here is what we have covered thus far. We have spoken about interest rates, how they affect mortgages, how they affect housing prices and the low interest rate environment we are witnessing. We have also talked about affordability and the price to rent metric, which is very important to decide whether you should buy a house or no. We have also covered using housing as inflation hedge and also using housing to build wealth. So now comes the most important question, which is this now the right time to buy? So let's get to it. So obviously the decision to buy a house depends on your own personal financial situation, okay, and it also depends on your view on the economy, especially with the COVID-19 crisis. It also depends where you live. We have talked about affordability, that the affordability is very different depending on the region. So if you live in San Francisco, affordability is very low, housing is very expensive. But if you live in Detroit, that's a different story. So now I'm going to talk about buying a house, I'm going to talk about it from a general level, basically at the macro level, okay? So let's start with supply-demand dynamics. So if you look at supply, inventory is very tight. There is not a lot of supply out there, okay? So that's bullish for housing prices. Just think about it this way, okay? A few years ago, you would drive by and then you see houses for sale everywhere. Now you don't see it as much. There is not a lot of inventory for sale, and that's constructive for prices. On the demand side of the equation, the housing industry is betting on pent-up demand from millennials, okay? There is also another potential driver for demand, which is due to the COVID-19 crisis, okay? So think about it this way. A lot of people are working from home, or going forward, they're going to be working from home, and they just realize that they don't have enough space, so they might need to upgrade, and thus that might drive demand up. So then if you look at the low interest rate environment, and then you look at affordability, okay? So we have spoken about affordability in the previous video. It's relatively high versus history, which makes it interesting to buy a house right now. The other thing that's interesting is, like, look, you could potentially also buy a house as a hedge for inflation if you think that, look, like all these actions by the government, whether on the fiscal side or on the monetary side, will ultimately create inflation. And if that's the case, buying a house is a potentially good hedge for that. So if we put it together, and let me give you my opinion, we put all these arguments together, I think it's a pretty good time to buy a house right now, okay, given all these factors. Now, obviously, again, you know, this is not for everybody, so this is not a personal advice. It depends on your personal situation, financial situation and location, but overall, it's a pretty good time to buy. Okay. Let's now switch gears and let me give you some tips that I have learned over the years from personal experience when purchasing a house, okay? So tip number one is you gotta shop for interest rates, okay? The reason is as we have seen in the first video, interest rates have a very important role on how much you pay per month, and you want to get the lowest interest rates possible. Now you will think interest rates between banks are the same. They are not. Trust me on this, okay? So what you want is you want to get some quotes from different banks, but also, like, the problem is each time you try to get like quote, they run your credit, and then you don't want to have that multiple times. So instead, what you can do is ask your friends, ask people that have purchased the house recently, how much interest rates, you know, what the interest rates they have paid, and then that way you can have an idea on which banks to use. But definitely don't assume that you can just go to one bank and that's the interest rates. It's really different from bank to bank. Second thing, pay attention to big expenses such as the HVAC and roof. What you don't want is buying a house where the roof is really old, the HVAC is old, a year into the house, then you have to replace them, and these are big expenses, okay? So either you have to negotiate prior to buying a house, okay, you lower price, or you can ask for the roof to be replaced prior to buying a house, but definitely these are very important expenses that you have to pay attention to. Third tip is consider having a home warranty. Okay, with the home warranty, they cost, it depends, but call it $400, $500 a year. Okay, so it's not that expensive. But when you have an issue, let's say your dishwasher broke, you can call the home warranty and then they can replace things. So that way you can avoid the big cost. Okay, so a company that I have used personally is Old Republic. I don't have any affiliation with them. I've been very happy with their service. Anyway, so you can shop for a home warranty. I do think it's worth it when you buy a house. Number 4 is pay attention also to this very important detail, which is like, are you planning to move? Are you planning to, let's say you're planning to move in the next few years. In that case, you have a problem with transaction cost, okay? Because you can buy a house and sure enough, the price of the house goes up. But if you then have to sell it in 2 years, all right? So think about it. You paid closing cost when you bought, okay, and then at the exit you have to pay closing costs, and then you have to hire a real estate agent, okay, and you probably it's gonna cost you 6% of the price. So these are big transaction costs. In that case, even though the price of the house goes up, all right, if these transaction costs are too high, it might not be worth buying a house. So that's something to pay attention to it. And last but not least is buy bigger than what you need if you can afford it. What I mean by this, have an extra bedroom. A lot of things can happen. You might have a kid, an extra kid that is not expected, right? That happens, trust me. The other thing that could happen is like with this COVID situation, a lot of people are realizing that they need a home office. Maybe you didn't have a home office, okay? Or you need extra space. So if you had that extra space, you don't have to sell a house and then buy again, because you're gonna pay a lot of transaction costs. So in that case, having that extra bedroom is really helpful. But again, that's only if your financial situation can permit that. So this concludes our housing series. Make sure you check out my other 2 videos with the link below, and also make sure you like, you subscribe and share. Thank you, and I will see you next time.